A seemingly routine patrol at Oakridge Central Station became extraordinary when 7-year-old Mia Johnson, clutching her worn teddy bear, locked eyes with Max, Officer Richard Tanner's German Shepherd. The white officer dismissed her as another troublesome kid, but Max broke protocol, pulling against his leash toward the child. The commotion drew stares as the dog whined insistently. This unexpected connection between a frightened black child and a police dog would uncover a criminal enterprise and transform how Officer Tanner viewed his community, challenging biases he never acknowledged existed. Life for Mia Johnson in Westside Gardens was defined by systematic invisibility. The predominantly black neighborhood existed in stark contrast to the pristine communities across town, with crumbling sidewalks, unreliable public transportation, and streetlights that remained broken for months, despite repeated calls to city services. Mia understood invisibility intimately through 7 years of experiences that taught her black children were seen differently. Her mother, Keisha, worked 3 jobs: morning shifts at the hospital cafeteria, afternoon office cleaning, and weekend retail, leaving Mia often alone or with Mrs. Wilkins next door, whose arthritis made childcare difficult. Their apartment featured water stains on the ceiling that the landlord repeatedly ignored, windows that let in winter drafts, and a temperamental lock that required perfect alignment to secure properly. School offered no respite from this pattern of neglect. Miss Thompson, her second-grade teacher at Oakridge Elementary, had perfected selective vision when Mia raised her hand during class discussions, while immediately acknowledging Emma, Connor, or Aiden with encouraging smiles. Just yesterday, Mia had kept her hand raised for 20 minutes during the science lesson, arm aching but determined, only to have Miss Thompson end the discussion without ever calling on her, despite acknowledging 6 white students during the same period. The playground followed similar unwritten rules. Certain equipment somehow became unavailable when Mia approached, and group activities mysteriously reached capacity. She learned to occupy herself, finding companionship in books and her stuffed bear Somerset, who never interrupted her stories or pretended not to see her. The day before the station incident changed everything. Mia noticed unusual activity in their apartment building. Men in expensive suits visited the end unit on their floor, normally vacant but recently occupied by tenants no one ever seemed to see. Children, approximately her age, with downcast eyes and tense postures, were escorted inside. Something about their expressions triggered a recognition in Mia, the same careful blankness she adopted when hoping to avoid negative attention. She mentioned these observations to Officer Wilson during his community walkthrough that afternoon. The white patrolman barely concealed his impatience as she described the suspicious visitors and frightened children. He knelt with exaggerated slowness, speaking with the deliberate tone adults reserved for particularly slow children. "Look here, little lady. Big buildings have lots of people coming and going. Those were probably just families visiting relatives. You have quite an imagination, but police officers have real problems to solve. Run along and play with your dolls." He dismissed her with a patronizing pat on the head, then continued his conversation with the building superintendent, rolling his eyes as she walked away. That night, unable to sleep as she heard muffled crying through the thin walls separating their apartment from the end unit, Mia used the tablet Keisha had purchased through a school discount program. She researched police dogs, fascinated by their training and capabilities. A video demonstrated how K9 units responded to hand signals, showing the precise movements handlers used to direct their canine partners. One signal particularly caught her attention, a specific gesture that indicated the presence of hidden contraband or people. Mia practiced the movement repeatedly, determined to master it. She memorized the positioning of fingers, the subtle wrist rotation, noting how the trainers in the video kept the movement close to their body to avoid detection. Somerset became her practice audience as she refined the gesture, imagining scenarios where someone might need to silently communicate with a police dog. As she practiced, the sounds from next door grew more disturbing. Harsh whispers, shuffling movements, and the distinct click of locks engaging. Mia formulated her plan while listening to these ominous sounds, calculating bus routes and timing. Her mother would work double shifts tomorrow, covering for a sick colleague, which meant Mia would be unsupervised after school. Instead of going to Mrs. Wilkins, she would take the bus to Oakridge Central Station, where police regularly patrolled with K-9 units. Somerset would accompany her for courage. The decision solidified as she heard a child in the neighboring apartment whimper in fear, followed by a sharp sound of someone being silenced. Mia tucked the research page into her school notebook and finally drifted to sleep, her small hand still practicing the signal under her blanket, preparing for a confrontation that would shatter her invisibility in ways she could never anticipate. Officer Richard Tanner navigated his patrol vehicle through the pristine streets of Eastridge with the practiced ease of someone born to privilege. His family name adorned the community center in this affluent neighborhood, a testament to generations of Tanners who had shaped Oakridge through political influence and strategic philanthropy. The manicured lawns and stately homes reflected a community where residents expected problems to be addressed immediately, unlike the perpetually delayed responses to issues across town in neighborhoods like Westside Gardens. Tanner joined the force following an unspoken family tradition. While his father managed investments from a corner office downtown and his brother argued cases as a district attorney, Richard upheld the family commitment to public service by wearing the badge. He considered himself one of the good officers, professional and fair, completely unaware of the subtle biases that influenced his every interaction with minority citizens. Sitting beside him in the specially equipped K-9 vehicle was his partner of 4 years, Max, a German shepherd, with intelligence that sometimes seemed almost human. Their partnership had produced impressive results: 28 drug busts, 15 weapons recoveries, and 3 successful tracking operations that located missing persons. Most significant was their work on a human trafficking case last year, where Max detected the presence of people hidden in a sealed shipping container that conventional searches had cleared. This record led to their special assignment monitoring transportation hubs throughout Oakridge, though Tanner typically directed these efforts toward Black and Hispanic travelers who triggered his unconscious suspicion. His desk contained 6 commendations and 1 buried complaint filed by Dr. Deuces. Lawrence Jenkins, a Black history professor at Oakridge University, whom Tanner had detained for 45 minutes based on a suspicious bulge that turned out to be a leather-bound edition of Frederick Douglass' speeches. The incident report, marked resolved without disciplinary action by Captain Parker, concluded that Officer Tanner had followed appropriate procedures based on observed behavioral indicators. The morning that would lead to their encounter with Mia began with an argument in the station briefing room. Detective Yasmin Rhodes, one of 3 Black officers in the department, had placed statistical printouts on each chair before the morning briefing. The data displayed racial disparities in traffic stops, searches, and arrests throughout Oakridge, with numbers highlighted in alarming red. "Care to explain these patterns, Tanner?" Rhodes asked as he examined the papers with growing discomfort. Her tone carried the exhaustion of someone who had this conversation too many times. "Numbers without context, Rhodes," he replied dismissively. "You know suspects often come from high crime areas, which happen to be predominantly minority neighborhoods. We go where the crime is." Rhodes leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. "And why are they high crime areas, Tanner?" "Because that's where we concentrate our patrols, looking for trouble. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Look at these search statistics. White suspects with contraband 22% of the time, Black suspects 12%. You're searching more Black citizens, but finding less, which suggests Captain Parker interrupted their increasingly heated exchange by assigning daily patrols. Tanner and Max, take Oakridge Central Station. We've had vague reports of suspicious activity there, probably nothing, but visibility deters problems." Tanner nodded, relieved to escape Rhodes and her uncomfortable statistics. Driving toward the station, he considered the assignment a waste of resources. Max sensed his partner's mood, resting his muzzle on Tanner's thigh with a sympathetic whine. "Just political theater, buddy," Tanner murmured, scratching behind Max's ears. "The captain needs to show presence in transportation hubs because the mayor's worried about re-election. We'll walk around looking official, scare off any teenagers thinking about making trouble, and be back filing paperwork by lunch." This dismissive attitude would be completely transformed within the hour when Max's unprecedented reaction to a small black girl clutching a teddy bear would force Tanner to question everything he thought he knew about his partner, his profession, and his own perception of the community he had sworn to protect and serve. Chaos erupted in the central concourse of Oakridge Station when Max broke protocol. Tanner struggled with the leather leash as his normally obedient partner strained toward the small black girl with single-minded determination. "Max, heel!" Tanner commanded sharply, embarrassment coloring his face, as travelers stopped to stare at the spectacle of an officer unable to control his K9. The German Shepherd ignored the command completely, whining with unusual urgency. Station security approached rapidly, a burly officer named Gonzalez immediately confronting the child rather than addressing the uncontrolled police dog. "What did you do to that animal?" he demanded, towering over Mia, whose eyes widened with fear though she maintained her grip on Somerset. These canine seconds are trained police officers. Interfering with them is a serious offense. Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she remained silent, gaze shifting between Max and the maintenance doorway behind Gonzalez. Tanner finally regained enough control to prevent Max from reaching the girl, though the dog continued making distressed sounds unlike anything he had heard from his partner before. "Has he been poisoned? Did you give him something?" Gonzalez continued his interrogation, his hand moving to rest meaningfully on his taser. The growing scene had attracted attention throughout the concourse, with travelers filming the confrontation on their phones. Tanner recognized the public relations disaster unfolding. An armed security officer intimidating a crying black child while a police dog appeared agitated. Before he could intervene, Max suddenly gave 3 sharp barks and pulled toward the maintenance corridor, nearly yanking Tanner off balance again. The dog's behavior presented Tanner with an immediate dilemma. K9 protocol dictated maintaining control at all times, especially in public spaces. Max's training emphasized responding only to official handler commands, never to civilians, and certainly never breaking formation to approach a child. Every instinct from Tanner's training urged him to assert dominance and force compliance, possibly even muzzling Max if the behavior continued. Yet something about his partner's persistence nagged at his professional judgment. In 4 years, Max had never once broken protocol without legitimate cause. His certification scores in obedience exceeded department standards by 27%. This wasn't random misbehavior, this was communication. "Officer Tanner!" A familiar voice cut through the tension. Detective Rhodes approached rapidly, badge displayed. "I received notification about a disturbance involving your K9. Her gaze shifted to Mia, recognition flickering across her features. "Mia Johnson? From the Westside Community Center?" The girl nodded slightly, still watchful of Gonzalez. Rhodes positioned herself between the security officer and the child, her body language clearly protective. "I know this young lady. She attends our weekend literacy program." Turning to Tanner, she asked, "What happened here?" Before Tanner could respond, Max barked again, pulling insistently toward the maintenance area marked Authorized Personnel Only. The dog's behavior was consistent with his training indicators for detecting contraband or human presence. Making a split-second decision that would later be scrutinized in multiple review boards, Tanner nodded toward the restricted doorway. "Max is alerting to something. I need to follow his indication." Gonzalez blocked their path. That area requires security clearance and supervision from Transit Authority personnel. "You can't just..." Rhodes interrupted. "Detective Yasmin Rhodes, Major Crimes. This K9 is certified in detection of narcotics and human trafficking. Interfering with his investigation could constitute obstruction." She produced her phone, already dialing. "I can have Captain Parker explain the jurisdictional override to your supervisor, or you can facilitate our immediate access." Her tone left no room for argument. While Rhodes handled the increasingly uncomfortable security officer, Tanner knelt beside Mia, attempting a gentler approach than Gonzalez. "Did you do something to get Max's attention?" he asked, watching her expression carefully. Mia hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Can you tell me what you did?" Tanner pressed, conscious of Max's continued alertness. "I researched police dogs last night," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the station's ambient noise. "I learned their signals. There are bad men next door to our apartment taking children inside. Officer Wilson wouldn't listen yesterday. I thought maybe the dog would." The simplicity of her explanation stunned Tanner. This child had deliberately sought out a K-9 unit, researched appropriate signals, and executed one perfectly enough to trigger Max's training response. Meanwhile, Rhodes had secured reluctant authorization to inspect the maintenance area. Their search initially revealed nothing unusual: supply closets, electrical panels, and equipment storage. Max, however, remained agitated, circling repeatedly near a fleet of maintenance vehicles. Tanner's initial skepticism resurfaced as they found nothing suspicious. "Max has never given a false positive before," he muttered, more to himself than Rhodes. "Something's here." Rhodes nodded toward Mia, who waited with a female officer near the entrance. "That child specifically sought out your K-9. She's 7 years old, Tanner. 7. She researched K-9 signals and executed one correctly because adult officers dismissed her concerns." The implication hung between them. Would he have taken Mia seriously if she had approached him directly? Before he could respond, Max suddenly alerted at a specific maintenance cart, pawing insistently at its lower compartment. Closer inspection revealed subtle modifications to the vehicle's storage areas, custom hydraulics creating hidden compartments between legitimate equipment spaces. The compartments were empty, but showed evidence of recent use: scuff marks, food wrappers, and most disturbingly, a small pink hair tie identical to the ones in Mia's braids. Simultaneous with their discovery, Rhodes received preliminary information from officers interviewing Mia. The girl described children being moved into the supposedly vacant apartment beside hers, unusual late-night activities, and strange men in expensive clothing visiting at irregular hours. She had attempted to report her observations to Officer Wilson during his community patrol, only to be dismissed with patronizing comments about her imagination. The revelation that a 7-year-old black girl had not only recognized potential criminal activity, but had strategized a way to circumvent adult dismissal of her concerns, studying police dog training and signals, planning her approach to the transportation hub where K-9 units patrolled, and successfully executing that plan, forced Tanner to confront his own dismissive assumptions. Would he have taken her seriously if she had approached him directly instead of Max? The uncomfortable answer formed in his mind as evidence technicians documented the modified vehicles and detectives expanded the investigation throughout the transportation system. He watched Mia from across the room, still clutching her teddy bear while providing detailed descriptions to a sketch artist. Her determination had potentially uncovered a trafficking operation that had eluded professional law enforcement. As the evidence mounted confirming Mia's suspicions, Tanner experienced the first significant crack in his professional worldview, a recognition that his perception of which voices deserved attention might be fundamentally flawed. The investigation expanded rapidly across Oakridge's transportation network, revealing a sophisticated operation hiding in plain sight. Transit authority offices buzzed with activity as police secured records, interviewed employees, and mapped potential trafficking routes through the city's bus, train, and maintenance systems. At the center of this operation sat Thomas Whitfield, the Transit Authority Director, whose family had managed Oakridge's transportation infrastructure for 3 generations. His office occupied the top floor of the Transit Authority headquarters, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he effectively controlled through transportation policy. Whitfield presented the perfect civic leader image: silver hair always perfectly coiffed, custom suits projecting authority without ostentation, and a practiced smile that appeared regularly in city publications announcing transit improvements. His annual donations to the Police Foundation funded equipment upgrades and the recognition dinner where officers received commendations. When Tanner and Rhodes arrived to interview him about the modified maintenance vehicles, Whitfield welcomed them with practiced corporate hospitality, offering premium coffee served in fine china rather than station house styrofoam. "Officer Tanner," Whitfield greeted warmly, extending his hand. "Your father and I serve on the hospital board together. Fine man, upstanding family." His handshake was firm, his eye contact direct, conveying mutual understanding between men of similar backgrounds. When he turned to Rhodes, his demeanor subtly shifted, smile slightly less warm, handshake a fraction shorter. "And detective, Rhodes, is it? From Major Crimes?" The slight hesitation before her name communicated volumes. Throughout their interview, Whitfield maintained perfect cooperation while revealing nothing of substance. He expressed deep concern about potential criminal elements infiltrating his transportation system, promised complete transparency with their investigation, and pledged every possible resource to assist their efforts. Yet Tanner noticed how Whitfield directed substantive responses toward him while offering Rhodes platitudes and deflections. When Rhodes pressed about maintenance vehicle inspection protocols, Whitfield smoothly redirected the conversation. Officer Tanner understands the complexities of large operational systems, having grown up with family discussions about civic management. These maintenance schedules involve multiple departments with overlapping responsibilities. The implied message was clear. Tanner belonged in this conversation. Rhodes did not. The pattern continued throughout their investigation. When requesting employee records, Rhodes received excuses about human resources, protocols, and privacy concerns, while the same requests from Tanner produced immediate compliance. Departmental heads maintained uncomfortable eye contact with Rhodes during interviews while answering questions Tanner asked, even when he merely repeated Rhodes' inquiries. These interactions forced Tanner to recognize the subtle barriers Rhodes navigated daily, the need to work twice as hard for half the respect, the constant underlying message that she didn't belong despite her superior detective qualifications. Meanwhile, Mia and her mother experienced immediate backlash. Keisha Johnson received termination notices from 2 housekeeping clients, both families connected to Whitfield through business associations. Their apartment building suddenly faced emergency code violation inspections, focusing specifically on their unit, with citations for minor infractions that had existed for years without previous comment. During a follow-up interview at their apartment, Tanner witnessed the building superintendent slipping notices under their door while ignoring identical issues in neighboring units. When confronted, the man shrugged dismissively, just following instructions from management. Some tenants cause problems. They face consequences. The blatant intimidation tactics connected directly to Mia's involvement in their investigation. Rhodes arranged alternative housing through a community assistance program, but the application mysteriously stalled in processing despite meeting all qualification requirements. Each roadblock demonstrated the invisible network of influence extending throughout Oakridge's systems, activated against a single mother and her daughter for disrupting the established order. The investigation revealed more disturbing patterns as they delved deeper into transportation records. Multiple reports from Westside residents about suspicious activities around transit hubs had been systematically downgraded in priority or misclassified as non-criminal complaints. Missing persons reports filed by Black and immigrant families received minimal follow-up compared to similar cases from affluent neighborhoods. When questioned about these disparities, department supervisors cited resource allocation based on probability of resolution, bureaucratic language, masking, systematic neglect of certain communities. As they assembled evidence connecting modified transportation vehicles to specific disappearances, surveillance footage from Oakridge Central Station covering the precise times of suspected trafficking movements was discovered to be corrupted or missing entirely. Technicians attributed this to routine system maintenance, despite no similar gaps existing for footage from other time periods. Their investigation timeline coincided with Oakridge's annual Police Foundation fundraiser, where Chief Parker was photographed receiving a ceremonial check from Whitfield for $50,000 to fund new department equipment. The following morning, Parker called Tanner and Rhodes into his office, surrounded by plaques acknowledging transit authority contributions to the department. "I understand you've been focusing significant resources on transportation hubs," he began, carefully arranging files on his immaculate desk. "While your initiative is commendable, we have pressing cases requiring immediate attention. The East Side robbery series has community leaders demanding results, and the mayor's office is prioritizing the downtown revitalization security protocols." The implicit instruction was clear: shift focus away from the Transit Authority investigation. When Rhodes attempted to present evidence about the modified vehicles and suspicious pattern of missing persons reports, Parker examined his watch with exaggerated concern. "I have a meeting with the City Council in 20 minutes. Submit your findings through proper channels, and we'll evaluate resource allocation accordingly." As they left his office, Rhodes muttered, "Proper channels, where evidence goes to die, in redacted reports and bureaucratic limbo." Tanner remained silent, processing the realization that the department he had proudly served might be actively suppressing an investigation threatening powerful interests. The system he had believed fundamentally fair, despite occasional imperfections, now revealed itself as potentially corrupt at structural levels, protecting those with influence while dismissing victims from communities like Westside Gardens. That evening, reviewing case notes in the conference room, they discovered the surveillance footage folders completely removed from evidence storage, not just files missing, but entire case identifiers erased from the system. The deliberate sabotage confirmed their growing suspicion that the trafficking operation enjoyed protection from within the department itself, transforming their investigation from routine criminal pursuit to potential exposure of corruption reaching into Oakridge's highest offices. Richard Tanner's worldview unraveled rapidly as the investigation continued, challenging lifelong assumptions about his community, profession, and identity. Growing up in Eastridge meant absorbing certain unspoken truths: that success came through hard work and merit, that systems functioned fairly for those who followed rules, that police officers were guardians against chaos rather than enforcers of selective order. Each new revelation about the transportation hub investigation fractured these comfortable certainties, forcing uncomfortable recognition of his own participation in systems designed to protect people who looked like him while creating barriers for those who did not. The first significant confrontation occurred with his longtime patrol partner, Officer Scott Brennan, in the precinct locker room. Brennan leaned against the metal lockers, arms crossed over his chest as Tanner gathered evidence files for his meeting with Rhodes. "Heard you're still chasing ghost stories with Rhodes instead of handling real police work," Brennan remarked, voice pitched to carry across the room where other officers prepared for shift change. "All because some Westside kid made up stories about bogeymen." Tanner continued organizing his materials, attempting to avoid escalation. "The evidence supports further investigation," Brennan snorted derisively. "Evidence? Those people see cops as the enemy, man. Kid probably got coached by mom hoping for a settlement from the department. That Johnson woman's working the system, 3 jobs supposedly, but still living in subsidized housing. Meanwhile, Rhodes is using you to push her diversity agenda through major crimes." Something in Brennan's dismissive tone, the casual certainty with which he disparaged Mia, Keisha, and Rhodes without knowing any of them, triggered something in Tanner. That kid risked her safety to report suspicious activity after being dismissed by another officer. Her mother works 30 hours at the hospital cafeteria, 20 cleaning offices, and weekend retail to provide for her daughter without assistance from anyone. And Rhodes has solved more major cases than anyone in our division, despite dealing with attitudes exactly like yours every single day. The locker room fell silent as officers turned to watch the confrontation. Brennan straightened, surprise evident before his expression hardened. "Sounds like you're choosing sides, brother. Careful who you align with in this department." The implied threat hung between them, dissolving 4 years of partnership in an instant. Tanner gathered his materials without response, recognizing that crossing this line meant permanent alteration to his professional relationships. The fractures extended beyond the department into his personal life. Sunday dinner at his parents' colonial-style home in Eastridge's historic district had been mandatory Tanner family tradition for 3 generations. His father, James Tanner III, presided over these gatherings with patrician authority, using the occasion to reinforce family expectations and community standards. When Richard arrived late after interviewing witnesses in Westside Gardens, conversation halted as family members noted his rumpled appearance. "Criminal elements keeping our protector busy?" His father inquired with practiced joviality that barely masked disapproval. Throughout dinner, pointed questions emerged about his current cases, with particular interest in the transit situation that Thomas Whitfield mentioned at the club yesterday. Richard provided minimal details, increasingly uncomfortable with his family's casual connections to subjects of an active criminal investigation. The breaking point came during coffee service in the formal living room, when his brother William, the assistant district attorney, casually mentioned that cases involving certain communities require different handling to avoid unnecessary complications for the department. The implication that justice applied differently based on neighborhood or race struck Richard with new significance after witnessing Mia's experiences. "Different handling," he repeated slowly. "You mean like ignoring evidence when it involves Westside residents, or expediting cases when victims come from our neighborhood?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as his mother set down her china cup with deliberate precision. "Richard, you've always been idealistic," his father interjected. "But there's idealism, and there's the right kind of policing that maintains order in a complex society. Your grandfather understood this when he served, as did every tanner who wore the badge." The phrase, "the right kind of policing," clarified everything. Richard stood, declining dessert for the first time in family memory. "I'm beginning to understand exactly what kind of policing our family has supported," he said quietly, "and I'm not certain I can continue that tradition." The drive home featured a silent reckoning with generations of family mythology suddenly revealed as carefully constructed justification for systematic inequity. Meanwhile, Mia faced her own isolation. School had become increasingly hostile territory as word spread about her involvement with police. Classmates whose parents worked for the transit authority or municipal services suddenly excluded her from activities. Her teacher, Miss Thompson, seemed to find new reasons for disciplinary action: incomplete homework when Mia had submitted all assignments, excessive bathroom breaks when she requested permission once, disrupting class when she whispered a question to another student. During recess, Mia sat alone with Somerset, watching other children play from the concrete edge of the playground. After school, Keisha received her third termination notice. The downtown law firm where she cleaned offices evenings had restructured their maintenance contracts, eliminating her position despite 3 years of positive performance reviews. The firm represented several transit authority board members in personal legal matters. That evening, their landlord delivered an eviction notice citing multiple code violations and lease infractions, giving them 72 hours to vacate. Rhodes attempted to arrange emergency housing through police victim services, but the application faced administrative issues requiring additional review, despite meeting all program qualifications. When Rhodes shared this development during their evening briefing, Tanner made an impulsive decision that surprised even himself. "I have a property they can use," he offered, thinking of the small rental house his grandfather had left him near the university district. 2 bedrooms, furnished, available immediately. Rhodes stared with undisguised shock. "You're offering your property to witnesses in our investigation? That crosses every boundary in the procedural handbook." Tanner nodded, understanding the professional lines he was obliterating. "The alternative is watching them forced onto the street as punishment for doing exactly what we ask citizens to do: report suspicious activity and cooperate with police." His decision triggered immediate consequences. The next morning, union representatives requested a meeting to discuss his potential conflicts of interest and liability concerns regarding witness housing arrangements. Captain Parker reassigned him to administrative duties pending review, separating him from Max for the first time in 4 years. The K-9 officer who temporarily assumed Max's handling reported unusual agitation and refusal to comply with standard commands. The separation seemed to affect both partners. Tanner found himself listening for the familiar click of Max's nails on linoleum beside his desk, while Max whined continuously and refused food when returned to the K-9 facility without Tanner. As departmental resistance to their investigation intensified, Tanner reviewed evidence files looking for connections they had missed. Transit Authority personnel records revealed an interesting pattern. Numerous security officers with disciplinary histories from other departments had been hired directly by Thomas Whitfield, including several with excessive force complaints specifically involving minority citizens. Financial records showed suspicious patterns of cash deposits to certain officers' accounts following shifts at specific transportation hubs. Most disturbing was a personnel file he discovered while searching for maintenance vehicle inspection records. Officer Wilson, who had dismissed Mia's initial report, had previously served under Captain Parker in another district before both transferred to Oakridge under unusual circumstances involving sealed administrative reviews. Their professional connection predated official records, with photographs showing Parker serving as best man at Wilson's wedding 20 years earlier. The evidence suggested corruption extended beyond transportation employees to potentially include police leadership, creating a network of protection for the trafficking operation. The realization transformed the investigation from merely tracking criminal activity to potentially exposing corruption within the department itself, placing both Rhodes and Tanner at risk from the very institution they had sworn to serve. The investigation expanded beyond Oakridge as Rhodes and Tanner, now working unofficially due to his administrative reassignment, discovered disturbing connections to similar operations in neighboring cities. Using personal time and unofficial resources, they identified a pattern of transportation hub modifications identical to those in Oakridge implemented in transit systems across 3 states. Each location featured the same elements: restricted maintenance areas, modified vehicles, and strategic camera blind spots in high-traffic sections where vulnerable individuals could be moved without detection. Most significantly, each city showed parallel patterns of dismissed reports from minority communities and evidence of potential law enforcement involvement in suppressing investigations. Rhodes accessed national databases through professional contacts, discovering that missing persons reports involving Black and immigrant children showed statistical anomalies across these connected cities. Reports were systematically categorized as runaway juvenile rather than missing person, despite evidence contradicting voluntary departure. This classification difference meant reduced investigative resources, no Amber Alerts, and minimal follow-up requirements. The pattern suggested an organized, sophisticated operation with knowledge of police procedural loopholes, specifically targeting children least likely to generate sustained official attention. When they attempted to present their findings to Internal Affairs, the response was immediate bureaucratic obstruction. "Your evidence collection occurred while Officer Tanner was on administrative leave," the IA supervisor noted without looking up from the paperwork. Additionally, these connections to other jurisdictions would require multi-agency coordination through proper channels, with appropriate approvals from each departmental chain of command. Rhodes leaned forward, frustration evident. "We're presenting evidence of a multi-state trafficking operation with potential law enforcement involvement. Are you suggesting we route this information through the very departments potentially compromised?" The supervisor closed the folder with deliberate slowness. "I'm suggesting this investigation is on administrative hold pending review. Further unauthorized activities could result in disciplinary action for both of you." The message was unambiguous. Official channels were closed. That evening, Mia called Tanner's cell phone, her voice tight with panic. "There are strange men watching the house," she whispered. "2 cars parked across the street for hours. They look like the men from my apartment building." Tanner immediately contacted Rhodes while driving toward his rental property. "Protective detail now," he instructed, pushing well above the speed limit. Mia reports surveillance at their location. Unknown subjects matching description of suspected trafficking personnel. Rhodes arrived simultaneously with Tanner at the small bungalow, both approaching cautiously with weapons ready. The vehicles Mia described had departed, but distinctive cigarette butts matched a brand found repeatedly near the maintenance vehicles at the transportation hub. They quickly implemented emergency evacuation procedures, gathering essential belongings, while Rhodes arranged temporary safe housing through personal connections rather than department resources. As they prepared to transfer Mia and Keisha to the new location, Max, whom Tanner had retrieved from the K-9 facility against regulations, suddenly alerted to a package delivered that afternoon sitting on the kitchen counter. Trained in explosives detection as part of his certification, Max's behavior indicated potential danger. The bomb squad confirmed his assessment, discovering a sophisticated incendiary device designed to destroy the house and eliminate evidence rather than maximize casualties, a professional attempt at evidence suppression rather than merely silencing witnesses. The near-miss assassination attempt finally triggered federal interest. FBI agent Kendra Williams arrived from the regional office, reviewing their evidence with professional efficiency. "This matches trafficking patterns we've been tracking across state lines," she confirmed, examining the transportation hub photographs. "The sophistication suggests organized criminal enterprise rather than isolated operators. The municipal connection is concerning but not unprecedented." Her involvement should have provided institutional support and resources, but local authorities immediately implemented procedural barriers against federal intervention. Captain Parker cited jurisdictional protocols requiring local oversight of all investigative activities, effectively limiting FBI access to evidence and witnesses. Whitfield leveraged political connections to challenge the federal involvement through emergency hearings with sympathetic judges, creating legal delays that stalled investigative momentum. Most disturbing was Whitfield's media strategy. A press conference organized through the Transit Authority's Public Relations Department featured Whitfield expressing deep concern about unfounded allegations damaging public trust in our essential transportation services. Without naming Mia directly, he referenced unfortunate situations where children's misunderstandings are exploited by individuals with political agendas. The careful phrasing avoided actionable defamation while effectively discrediting their key witness. Local news outlets, dependent on Transit Authority advertising revenue, provided uncritical coverage of Whitfield's statements while minimizing evidence of the trafficking operation. Department leadership implemented similar tactics against Tanner, with personnel releasing a statement about an officer experiencing personal difficulties affecting professional judgment who was receiving appropriate support during administrative leave. The coordinated character assassination extended to Rhodes through unofficial channels, with whispered suggestions that she had manipulated a vulnerable colleague to advance controversial positions within the department. Simultaneously, social services received anonymous reports questioning Keisha's parental fitness, triggering mandatory investigation, despite no previous concerns in Mia's school or medical records. The systematic attack against everyone connected to the investigation demonstrated the extensive influence network protecting the trafficking operation, confirming their suspicions about high-level involvement. Most alarming was the disappearance of key evidence. Physical samples from the modified transportation vehicles, secured in sealed federal evidence containers, vanished from secured storage. Digital records showing the pattern of missing persons reports developed correlation errors that fragmented the statistical analysis. Witness statements from transportation employees who had observed suspicious activities were recanted, with individuals suddenly receiving promotions or favorable transfers after changing their testimonies. Each setback revealed the operation's extensive reach through municipal systems, suggesting protection from powerful figures beyond Whitfield or even the police department. Their breakthrough came through unexpected channels. While officially removed from the investigation, Tanner utilized family connections he had previously taken for granted, accessing social circles where Whitfield and department leadership socialized. At his father's club, where he had avoided appearing since their confrontation, he observed Whitfield in close conversation with Judge Marshall, who had issued the injunction against federal investigators. Their casual reference to containment and the Westside situation provided no actionable evidence but confirmed the coordination of efforts against their investigation extended to the judicial system. Rhodes similarly leveraged community connections in Westside Gardens, working through church networks and neighborhood associations to identify patterns in disappearances and transportation hub activities that official records had obscured. Former transit employees, terminated under suspicious circumstances, provided unofficial statements about maintenance area modifications and unusual security protocols implemented around certain vehicles and facilities. The fragmented evidence suggested an operation more extensive than they had initially suspected, with potential connections to trafficking networks extending beyond state lines. Agent Williams confirmed similar patterns in 3 neighboring states, with transit systems implementing identical security features and maintenance area modifications. Most concerning was her discovery of sophisticated digital tracking embedded within Transit Authority scheduling software, capable of monitoring potential witnesses and flagging unusual access to certain records or areas. This explained how the operation had identified and neutralized potential threats so efficiently. The system itself was designed to protect criminal activity rather than expose it. The realization that they faced not merely individual corruption but an institutionalized system of criminal infrastructure forced them to completely reconsider their investigative approach. Official channels were compromised. Evidence disappeared when submitted through proper procedures, and witnesses faced immediate retaliation when formally interviewed. To proceed required abandoning traditional police methodology entirely, operating outside the systems designed to obstruct them while building an evidence collection secure from institutional interference. As they developed this parallel investigation, the stakes escalated from professional consequences to personal safety, with surveillance teams now openly monitoring their movements and communication channels compromised by unknown technical means. The transportation system that formed Oakridge's civic backbone had been weaponized against those attempting to expose its criminal exploitation, transforming the city itself into hostile territory for the investigators and the young girl whose courage had initiated their pursuit of justice. The investigation's official channels completely compromised, Rhodes established an unofficial headquarters at the Westside Community Center where she volunteered weekends. The aging facility featured peeling paint and outdated equipment, but provided crucial advantages: community ownership independent from municipal control, absence from official department documentation, and a basement level without external windows, minimizing surveillance vulnerability. Tanner arrived with Max through the service entrance, carrying evidence files rescued before administrative seizure could remove them from circulation. They converted the center's storage room into an investigative hub using personal resources rather than department equipment. Rhodes secured a private internet connection through a community organization grant, bypassing municipal systems, potentially monitoring their digital footprint. "We need trustworthy allies," Rhodes observed, pinning transportation hub photographs to a corkboard. "Official channels are compromised, but there must be clean officers willing to operate outside procedural constraints when children's safety is involved." Tanner considered the colleagues least connected to department politics or leadership influence. "Jenkins in cyber crimes," he suggested. She transferred from federal service, minimal connection to local networks. Garcia, from Traffic Division, repeatedly passed for promotion despite exemplary record, suggests resistance to political alignment. Williams, from Property Crimes, specifically requested assignment to Westside despite higher profile opportunities elsewhere. Rhodes nodded, adding names to their potential recruitment list. "We add civilians with specialized skills." Martinez teaches computer science at the community college, previously worked cybersecurity before academia. Pastor Townsend from First Community Church maintains extensive networks throughout Westside, can identify potential witnesses outside official channels. Dr. Jackson from Children's Hospital recognizes trafficking indicators from emergency room presentations. They assembled this unofficial task force through personal connections rather than professional channels, establishing operational security protocols that assumed potential compromise of standard department communications. Each member contributed specialized knowledge while maintaining plausible separation from official investigation, creating parallel information collection immune from administrative obstruction. Mia became an unexpected intelligence asset, her observational skills proving exceptional when reviewing transportation hub footage secured through unofficial channels. Where adults saw routine transit operations, she identified subtle patterns. Maintenance vehicles appearing at specific times, particular security personnel stationed at key positions during these movements, passengers displaying behavioral indicators of distress that adult observers missed. "The blue cart always comes through when the big clock shows 4:15, she noted, indicating a maintenance vehicle similar to those previously identified. "The man with the scar always stands by the south exit those days. Children with matching backpacks come through but never leave through regular doors." Her observations established predictable operational patterns invisible to conventional surveillance, allowing targeted monitoring of specific transportation movements without alerting security to their interest. FBI agent Williams provided crucial support while navigating institutional resistance to federal involvement. Though officially restricted from direct investigative participation by jurisdictional challenges, she shared technical resources through unofficial channels and connected them with parallel investigations in neighboring jurisdictions. Her most significant contribution came through digital forensic analysis of transportation scheduling software obtained through Rhodes's community college contact. The code revealed sophisticated monitoring systems integrated throughout transit operations. This explains how they've identified and neutralized potential witnesses so effectively, Williams explained, highlighting anomalous code segments. The software flags unusual access patterns to specific locations or records, essentially creating an early warning system against investigation. The discovery confirmed similar systems existed in 3 other cities' transportation networks, suggesting coordinated implementation across jurisdictional boundaries rather than isolated corruption. The digital connection provided their first concrete evidence of multi-state organization potentially meeting federal RICO statute requirements, creating legal pathway around local obstruction. As evidence accumulated through this parallel investigation, they prepared for coordinated enforcement action requiring official sanction despite institutional resistance. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Chief Parker contacted Rhodes directly, requesting private meeting at an unusual location, a coffee shop in neutral territory between department headquarters and Westside. The chief arrived alone, without the customary security detail accompanying leadership rank. "I understand you and Tanner have continued unofficial investigation despite administrative directives," he began without preamble once they secured a private corner table. Rhodes maintained professional composure despite surprise. "We're pursuing evidence of criminal activity potentially involving department personnel, Chief." Administrative barriers appeared designed to obstruct rather than regulate proper investigation. Parker nodded, expression unreadable. Institutional resistance doesn't necessarily indicate universal corruption, Detective. Some barriers exist to protect operational security during sensitive internal investigations. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. A separate internal affairs investigation into potential corruption began 6 months ago, focusing on officers with suspicious financial patterns. Your transportation hub case intersected with this existing operation, creating procedural complications. This revelation potentially explained the institutional resistance they had encountered. Parker continued, producing a department-issued phone. "I've secured authorization for limited operational support under special classified protocols. These access codes will provide 24 hours of unrestricted system access without generating standard notification flags. Patrol schedules have been modified to create a 30-minute response gap in sectors surrounding primary transportation hubs." The offer represented exactly what they needed: official sanction for enforcement action with minimized risk of compromise through departmental channels. Yet something about Parker's sudden cooperation triggered instinctive caution. The chief had navigated department politics for 27 years, maintaining leadership through multiple administrations. His connections throughout municipal systems included personal relationships with transit board members and regular golf outings with Whitfield himself. The convenient appearance with precisely the authorization they required suggested either remarkable timing or calculated intervention. Rhodes accepted the offered phone with appropriate professional gratitude while mentally flagging potential entrapment. "This will significantly enhance our operational capacity, Chief. We appreciate your discretion regarding ongoing investigation." Parker departed with final warning about containing communication to secured channels and maintaining operational security against potential internal compromise. They returned to their unofficial headquarters to integrate this unexpected official support into planned enforcement action. Tanner programmed the provided access codes into their secure systems, while Rhodes adjusted tactical planning to incorporate the patrol schedule modifications. As they prepared final briefing materials, Max's behavior suddenly changed, hackles raised, low growl directed toward the department phone containing Parker's access codes. The German Shepherd had demonstrated flawless threat assessment throughout the investigation, from his initial recognition of Mia's signal to the explosive device detection. His reaction to equipment provided directly from the department chief demanded serious consideration. Run complete isolation protocol on these codes before implementation, Tanner instructed their technical specialist. Assume potential digital tracking or system vulnerability. The precautionary analysis revealed sophisticated embedded monitoring within the authorization codes, not merely tracking their access but potentially providing remote surveillance of their entire operation once activated within their RESTI. Systems. Further investigation of the patrol schedule, modifications showed not defensive gaps protecting their operation, but strategic personnel positioning that would isolate their team from potential backup while maximizing exposure to officers. With connections to previously identified suspicious financial patterns. The trap was expertly designed. Had they implemented Parker's support as instructed, they would have compromised their entire operational security while potentially exposing witnesses and evidence to direct threat. The betrayal confirmed their suspicions that corruption reached highest departmental leadership, with Parker himself potentially involved directly, rather than merely providing political protection to the trafficking operation. This revelation fundamentally altered their strategic approach. No departmental resources could be considered secure, no official channel trusted, no procedural protection reliable. The transportation hub trafficking operation now appeared as merely visible element of more extensive criminal enterprise with institutional protection throughout Oakridge's municipal systems, including police leadership supposedly responsible for combating such corruption. The betrayal transformed their understanding of the challenges they faced while confirming the critical importance of their parallel investigation, operating completely outside compromised official channels. Operational security completely compromised by Parker's betrayal, the team accelerated their timeline while fundamentally revising tactical approaches. With Mia's family in protective custody and federal resources, now fully engaged following confirmation of multi-jurisdictional criminal enterprise, they identified the operation's contingency location through pattern analysis of maintenance vehicle movements. Transportation hub security modifications had initially focused their investigation on active stations, but Mia's detailed observations of vehicle movements revealed an alternate pattern, leading to the abandoned Westside maintenance facility. The decommissioned subway station, officially closed during budget cuts 5 years earlier, showed anomalous power consumption inconsistent with storage status. Thermal imaging obtained through FBI resources indicated human presence throughout the supposedly vacant facility, with particular concentration in lower-level areas, originally designed for train maintenance. They've established secondary operations infrastructure, Agent Williams confirmed, reviewing satellite imagery showing vehicle access patterns. Surface monitoring shows regular delivery schedules disguised as municipal maintenance, consistent with human housing requirements rather than equipment storage. The facility's isolated location in industrial Westside, minimal civilian traffic, and official designation as restricted municipal property created perfect operational security for trafficking activities. Most concerning was evidence that this contingency site had been prepared well before their investigation began, suggesting the operation anticipated eventual exposure and had established alternative infrastructure to maintain continuity during transition periods. Tactical challenges proved significant. The facility's underground portions featured limited access points, unknown internal modifications, and potential structural hazards from years of deferred maintenance. Most problematic was jurisdictional uncertainty, created by the facility's mixed ownership status between transit authority and municipal government, creating potential legal barriers to enforcement action without multi-agency coordination that would inevitably alert compromised officials. Rhodes developed operational parameters prioritizing victim recovery over evidence collection or apprehension. Primary objective is identifying and securing any children currently held within the facility, she emphasized during final briefing. Prosecution builds after victims reach safety. We assume hostile response from facility personnel with potential law enforcement training. Their tactical approach utilized Mia's transportation system knowledge combined with Max's specialized training. The German Shepherd's detection capabilities would locate hidden compartments or concealed areas within the facility, while Mia had provided detailed insights about maintenance vehicle modifications and potential adaptation to this secondary location. They coordinated with trusted federal assets to establish perimeter security while maintaining communication blackout regarding specific tactical timing, preventing information leakage through compromised channels. The operation commenced at 3:15 morning, minimizing civilian presence while maximizing darkness coverage for approach. Initial entry proceeded without resistance. Perimeter security appeared minimal, suggesting confidence in the facility's official designation as restricted municipal property rather than active physical measures. This changed dramatically upon reaching the main maintenance bay, where security personnel wearing transit authority uniforms but displaying tactical equipment inconsistent with standard issue immediately initiated defensive protocols. The resulting confrontation confirmed their suspicions about security personnel training. Response patterns indicated formal tactical background rather than conventional security procedures, with coordinated movements suggesting potential law enforcement or military experience. As federal agents secured the main level, Max alerted to concealed access points leading to sub-level maintenance areas not included in official facility blueprints. These modified spaces revealed the operation's true scope. Customized containment areas designed for temporary human housing, processing stations for identification document production, and staging areas for transportation to distribution points outside Oakridge jurisdiction. Most disturbing was discovery of 27 children housed in modified maintenance compartments, including several matching descriptions from missing persons reports filed in Westside and similar neighborhoods across 3 states. The tactical situation complicated dramatically with arrival of Transit Authority Director Whitfield, accompanied by Chief Parker and uniformed officers from Oakridge Police Department. Their unmarked vehicles approached with emergency lights disabled, suggesting unofficial response rather than standard departmental protocol. Whitfield immediately attempted assertion of jurisdictional authority, producing emergency authorization supposedly signed by the mayor. This facility remains under Transit Authority jurisdiction regardless of operational status, he announced with practiced authoritative tone. Any federal presence requires explicit cross-jurisdictional authorization through appropriate municipal channels. Parker positioned uniformed officers strategically throughout the facility entrance, creating immediate confusion about chain of command. These officers are responding to potential civil disturbance, he explained smoothly. Department protocols require securing municipal property during unauthorized access situations. The deliberate jurisdictional confusion created dangerous tactical uncertainty. Oakridge officers faced conflicting authority between their direct superior and federal agents, asserting crime scene jurisdiction. Several officers displayed visible discomfort, clearly recognizing the problematic nature of their positioning between legitimate law enforcement activities and potentially compromised leadership directives. Whitfield escalated pressure through calculated intimidation, addressing officers directly rather than through command structure. "Your cooperation tonight has been noted at highest departmental levels," he stated, implication clear that career advancement depended on current decisions. Those choosing alternative priorities should consider potential procedural reviews of past operations where discretion was exercised. The threat confirmed suspicions that Whitfield maintained leverage over officers through knowledge of procedural violations or misconduct previously overlooked, a control mechanism explaining otherwise inexplicable cooperation with potentially illegal directives. The confrontation escalated when security personnel used tactical confusion to initiate secondary response, isolating federal agents from the recovery area containing trafficked children. During this coordinated movement, Whitfield's private security detail, men wearing unmarked tactical equipment rather than Transit Authority uniforms, secured Mia alongside several recovered children, creating immediate hostage situation that fundamentally altered tactical dynamics. Communication jamming equipment activated simultaneously, isolating operational teams from external support while creating effective bargaining leverage against enforcement personnel. Tanner found himself directly opposing former colleagues, officers he had served alongside for years now, following directions from leadership he believed corrupted. The standoff presented impossible ethical calculation: departmental loyalty versus clear criminal activity occurring within his direct observation. As tension escalated toward potential armed confrontation, Tanner observed something remarkable. Mia, though clearly frightened, maintained unusual composure within the hostage grouping. Her hands moved subtly at her sides, not random nervous movement, but deliberate gestures resembling the signal she had originally used with Max. More incredibly, other children within the group began mimicking her movements, creating synchronized gestural pattern, initially imperceptible to adult observers focused on the armed confrontation. Max noticed first, ears alerting toward the children despite tactical chaos surrounding them. Within moments, 4 additional K-9 units present through federal resources similarly oriented toward the children, recognizing the trained signal Mia had researched and now transmitted to multiple frightened captives. What followed demonstrated the remarkable adaptive intelligence of specialized service animals. Without handler commands, all 5 dogs simultaneously initiated distraction protocols, creating chaotic response that momentarily disoriented the security personnel, maintaining the hostage containment. This critical distraction provided sufficient tactical advantage for federal personnel to secure defensive positions around the children while containing the armed confrontation without casualty escalation. The synchronized response between a 7-year-old trafficking witness and multiple professional K-9 units represented unprecedented coordination, demonstrating how Mia had transformed from vulnerable potential victim to active participant in her own liberation and that of others similarly threatened. As federal agents secured the facility and separated corrupted officers from those merely following chain of command without criminal intent, evidence collection revealed the operation's true scope. Documentation indicated trafficking networks extending through transportation systems across 7 states, with sophisticated financial operations converting human exploitation into legitimate-appearing revenue streams through municipal contract manipulation. Most disturbing were records connecting protection payments to officials throughout multiple jurisdictions, including law enforcement leadership, judicial representatives, and municipal administrators. The corruption extended beyond individual moral failures into systemic exploitation of institutional power, transforming public service infrastructure into criminal enterprise support mechanisms specifically targeting society's most vulnerable populations. The evidence implicated half Oakridge's departmental leadership in either direct participation or deliberate negligence, allowing criminal activity to proceed without intervention. Similar patterns appeared in connected jurisdictions, suggesting institutional failure transcending individual corruption into structural exploitation maintained through positional authority rather than merely personal moral compromise. Most significant was confirmation that initial reports from communities like Westside Gardens had been systematically suppressed for years, with legitimate concerns from residents dismissed using institutional authority specifically designed to protect those same citizens. The pattern confirmed what Mia had experienced directly: systematic invisibility imposed on entire communities whose legitimate fears and observations were discounted through institutional prejudice disguised as professional procedure. The operation's conclusion represented not merely criminal enterprise disruption, but fundamental challenge to systemic patterns, allowing such exploitation to develop initially, protected through institutional structures, supposedly designed for public protection rather than predation. 6 months following the Westside Maintenance Facility operation, Oakridge began painful institutional reconstruction under federal oversight committees. The Justice Department consent decree mandated comprehensive departmental restructuring with civilian oversight panels representing communities historically marginalized in municipal governance structures. Police leadership underwent complete reorganization, with qualified officers previously denied advancement due to political considerations, now occupying positions previously controlled through corruption rather than merit. Patrol allocations equalized across neighborhoods, eliminating historical disparity between response times in different communities. Tanner, cleared of administrative charges and reinstated with commendation, declined traditional patrol assignment in favor of specialized K-9 program, focusing on recovery operations and trafficking victim identification. His unit operated with unique protocols developed specifically from lessons learned during the Transportation Hub investigation, emphasizing community-originated intelligence and civilian partnership rather than traditional hierarchical enforcement structures. Max received specialized service recognition, his training protocols incorporated into department-wide programs, emphasizing animal intelligence applications beyond conventional enforcement applications. The partnership demonstrated potential for progressive policing models, prioritizing protection through genuine community connection rather than authoritarian presence. Their regular visits to Mia's school transformed into community safety education programs, emphasizing children's observation skills and legitimizing their concerns, rather than dismissing them as juvenile misunderstanding. The curriculum specifically addressed how young people could effectively communicate concerns when adults displayed dismissive responses, creating alternative reporting channels when conventional authority figures proved unreceptive. These institutional changes represented meaningful progress, yet significant challenges remained. Officers implicated in corruption received minimal sentences through plea arrangements that prevented comprehensive public disclosure of institutional failures. Whitfield secured favorable legal representation through remaining political connections, with federal charges reduced through bargain testimony against lower-level participants. Captain Parker avoided criminal prosecution entirely through immunity agreements, facilitating prosecution of interstate trafficking network leadership, maintaining his pension and retirement benefits despite administrative termination. This uneven accountability created lingering community skepticism about institutional commitment to genuine reform rather than superficial reorganization, preserving fundamental power dynamics through modified presentation rather than structural transformation. For Keisha Johnson, systemic barriers persisted despite her daughter's instrumental role exposing corruption. Employment opportunities remained limited by subtle discrimination, less obvious than previous retaliation, but equally effective maintaining economic insecurity. Housing applications faced administrative complications despite meeting all qualification requirements, forcing continued residence in subsidized units with maintenance issues persisting despite new management companies. Educational resources in Westside schools remained significantly below Oakridge standards despite equalization initiatives included in municipal reform packages. These ongoing disparities demonstrated how deeply systemic inequity penetrated civic infrastructure beyond individual corruption, requiring generational commitment rather than merely prosecutorial intervention to address effectively. The critical catalyst for substantial reform emerged unexpectedly during quarterly public oversight hearings established through federal consent decree requirements. These sessions typically featured institutional representatives presenting statistical improvements in procedural metrics, while community members expressed ongoing concerns discounted through bureaucratic response patterns. The familiar performance of participation without meaningful engagement seemed poised to continue institutional traditions of supervised neglect until Mia Johnson, now 8 years old, approached the microphone during public comment period. The chamber fell silent as this small figure stood before municipal leadership. Somerset clutched against her chest as she had during their first encounter at Oakridge Central Station. Before the Transportation Hub investigation, I was invisible, she began, voice initially soft but gaining strength with each word. When I raised my hand in class, my teacher looked past me to call on white students instead. When strange men brought frightened children into my building, the police officer told me to play with dolls instead of bothering him with imagination stories. When my mother reported broken heating during winter months, the landlord said, "Westside residents complain too much about minor problems." Her articulation of systemic invisibility resonated throughout the chamber, transforming statistical discussions into human experience impossible to discount through bureaucratic language. After helping expose trafficking networks, nothing really changed for us. She continued with remarkable clarity. The officers who ignored us received special retirement packages, while my mother still works 3 jobs. My school still has broken computers, while Eastridge Elementary got brand new tablets. Our apartment still has black mold that nobody fixes because Westside problems don't matter unless they affect important people across town. The simplicity of her observation crystallized fundamental failures persisting despite superficial reform efforts, exposing institutional performance of change without substantive transformation in community experience. Most significant was her conclusion, delivered with composure remarkable for her age. You create systems where people like me stay invisible until something happens that affects people who matter to you. Then you act surprised about problems everyone in my neighborhood tried telling you about for years. Nothing changes because you still think our voices matter less than yours, even when we're telling the truth and you're not. The testimony, broadcast through local news coverage and subsequently shared through national networks, transformed abstract policy discussions into concrete human consequences, impossible to dismiss through bureaucratic deflection. Public response forced acceleration of substantive reforms, addressing fundamental inequities rather than merely procedural modifications. Legislative response included passage of Mia's law requiring independent investigation of crimes reported by minority children, eliminating discretionary dismissal that had enabled trafficking operations to persist despite multiple reports from affected communities. Educational Resource Equalization received emergency funding through state intervention following national media coverage of disparity between Westside and Eastridge facilities. Housing code enforcement underwent comprehensive restructuring, eliminating differential enforcement patterns documented through statistical analysis of inspection records. Most significant institutional transformation manifested through community oversight mechanisms with actual enforcement authority rather than merely advisory capacity. Tanner, recognizing his responsibility extended beyond individual case resolution into systemic reform, accepted appointment to Citizen Review Board alongside Keisha Johnson. Their unlikely partnership, former officer from privileged background and Westside resident previously invisible to institutional power, represented potential for genuine collaboration across traditional barriers. Together, they established accountability standards, incorporating community experience alongside procedural metrics, creating evaluation systems, measuring impact rather than merely activity. Mia's most enduring contribution emerged through unexpected channel. Following Max's retirement from active service due to injury sustained during an unrelated rescue operation, the department faced standard protocol requiring specialized service animals transition to civilian adoption through carefully vetted placement process. Mia's application, supported by Tanner and Rhodes, received unanimous approval from Placement Committee, recognizing their unique connection. Their partnership continued through specialized training program, demonstrating communication methods developed during the trafficking investigation, establishing curriculum for national implementation teaching officers, effective engagement with traumatized children through animal intermediaries. The training seminars featured Mia and Max demonstrating the silent signals that initially broke through institutional barriers, separating vulnerable community members from protection systems supposedly designed for their benefit. Participants witnessed firsthand how specialized communication between civilian observer and trained service animal created pathways transcending traditional authority structures that often perpetuated systemic invisibility rather than addressing fundamental vulnerabilities. The ongoing partnership between a young black girl from Westside Gardens and a retired police service animal represented physical manifestation of the systemic transformation required throughout civic institutions, recognizing intelligence and value in voices traditionally dismissed through prejudice disguised as procedure. Their demonstration concluded each session with simple statement encapsulating lessons learned through the Transportation Hub investigation. Listening to those rendered voiceless by systems of power transforms not merely individual lives, but institutional structures themselves, creating protection through connection rather than control. The Oakridge transformation remained incomplete, with substantial challenges persisting through deeply embedded systemic patterns resistant to reform efforts. Yet the fundamental shift in institutional responsiveness created pathways previously unavailable for communities historically excluded from meaningful civic participation. The catalyst for this transformation, a 7-year-old girl's refusal to accept institutionalized invisibility, demonstrated how courage transcends physical size when moral clarity confronts systemic injustice. Her partnership with Max continued breaking barriers between communities and institutions, demonstrating daily that genuine security emerges through mutual recognition rather than hierarchical enforcement. Have you ever witnessed someone finding their voice despite systems designed to silence them? What responsibility do we have to listen when others' experiences differ from our own? This story demonstrates how institutional change often begins with one person refusing to remain invisible. Like, comment, subscribe, and share if you believe everyone deserves to be heard, especially those our systems have historically silenced. Thank you for witnessing Mia's journey from invisibility to empowerment, and may we all find courage to recognize truth regardless of who speaks it.